Welcome back to another episode of the Combat Chat podcast. It is an absolutely beautiful Saturday afternoon here in sunny Sydney. Just wrapped up a brutal week of training, so I'm looking forward to getting this conversation done and then going into hibernation until Monday, which is something I'm sure my guests can understand. Won't do too much of an intro because I'm really keen to get stuck into this conversation. On the other side of the line today, all the way from beautiful Perth, is the Scottish-born Muay Thai fighter, George Mann. How are you, sir?
Very well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Really glad to do this. And like I said, excited to get stuck into the conversation. So you are a very well-traveled fighter, well-known on the Australian scene, but also quite well-known globally. Give us a little wrap. Before we get into your history, give us a wrap, your record, a little bit of your career highlights.
Yep.
Yeah, what's the rap sheet thus far?
Yep. Try and make it as quick as possible. Started fighting when I was about 7 years old. Probably had about, 120 fights, something like that. But I tend to only really go off my professional record. So what happens in the UK is you have an amateur career. Then when you hit professional, your record starts from scratch. So my official record, I believe, is... Oh, man, I don't even know my record. Give me a sec. We can start that again.
No, that's all right. Just give us the pro record.
I can't even tell you. Well, I've literally I've got it on my phone somewhere. One sec. Okay, would you like to start that again or?
No, that's all right.
So my pro record is 34 wins and 7 losses.
Yeah.
And that basically is all fights which are 3 threes full Thai rules or 5 threes full Thai rules. So yeah, I've been fighting the best for quite some time now. My first fight as a pro, I was 14, and I pretty much continued. Yeah, I pretty much continued from there on. So I started in Thailand at 14, but then when I actually came back to the UK, I was probably 15 by the time I had my first pro fight.
So you were old.
Yes. But the level of guys that I was fighting back then, I was fighting guys from France, Portugal, you name it. And you actually probably know them all by now. So I fought Elias Mohamedi from France, who's now signed to One
Championship.
He had a great fight for the belt and was very unlucky. I fought Rui Botelho, who's killing it in the flyweight division, also on One from Portugal. So I, as a kid, I fought a lot of high-level names that a lot of people don't actually know about.
Yeah.
Just like I say, it was such a long time ago, and it was a different weight division, and times have moved on. But yeah, then I pretty much came to Australia, and I've been doing much the same, fighting Thais, fighting Australians, fighting Canadians. Yeah, I've just been fighting as many fights as I can.
Yeah. And I think I want to get into so you said you start fighting at 7 years old, which that's very Thai, right? You're one of the few Westerners who has that kind of a backing in your career to have started at the age of 7. So just explain to me how that comes together. Because it's not something, I mean, I think it's a little bit different in that part of the world where there's a little bit more competition for the juniors. But even there, I have to think most don't get started at sort of 7. So how does that come together?
Yep. So to be honest, it was a total fluke. I was actually just playing at one of my friend's house, and his mum said to him, "All right, we've got to go to kickboxing," which was Muay Thai. And she said, "Do you want to come along?" And I said, "Yeah." As you know, when you're a kid, you always want to follow your friend.
Yeah.
You always want to do what your friend's doing. So I said, "Yeah, I really want to go." So I quickly ran home, just around the corner, said to my mum, "Mum, I want to go to Muay Thai or kickboxing." She said, "No worries. Be home by this time. Your dinner's going to be ready." I was like, "Yeah, okay, cool. No worries." And then what happened was I started training for a couple of weeks, and it really wasn't long until they turned around and said, "Okay, we've got a fight for you. Do you want to take it?" And I said, yeah, why not? Let's do it. Obviously, I was a bit nervous and stuff.
So how long had you been training when the opportunity to fight came up?
My memory's a little bit foggy when it comes to that, but I believe it was only a couple of weeks. It wasn't a long period of time.
Got straight into it.
Yeah, pretty much. And my opponent at the time, so I had never been to a fight show, didn't know what a fight show was, didn't know what to expect. So you can just paint a picture in your head here. My opponent had been training for 4 years, had been very well-rounded, was very good, knew Ramoid and everything during the fight. We were actually the first fight on the card, so I didn't actually get to see what was going to happen when I was getting in there. So I got in there, my opponent was doing a Ramoy. I was just wandering around the ring, had no idea what to do. It was embarrassing. The fight was good. I lost the fight on a close fight, but I actually fought him 6 months later and beat him. So as a kid, you know what it's like. You just want to fight as much as you can and enjoy it, you know?
So from there, like I'm just so interested in a career that starts that young. So was there a lot of opportunities to compete? Were you busy from the age of 7? Yeah, there was.
Yep. Yeah. So in the UK, it's amazing. The culture, the junior fight scene there is incredible. And I can assure you now, there are kids coming up previous to my generation who are training now as juniors, and they are really, really, really good. And it's actually quite worrying. For example, there's kids that are 12 years old and have had 100 fights already. It's real. It's insane. Yeah. So, for example, there's one chap called Peter Spenceley. I personally think he changed the sport for the better. Where as a junior, he would have fight shows where in the one fight show he would have 4 rings in the same venue. And there would be fights happening one after the other, after the other, after the other. Yeah. And it was tournament based. So sometimes you would fight 6 times in a day. You know, it's really revolutionized the sport. It's impressive. So yeah, the upcoming generation is going to be scary. It really is.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like I think our junior scene is a little bit fragmented. It's very different state to state.
Yeah.
But we do get that a bit. It's not even just a good thing for junior. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing for people who are new to the like just amateurs in general. Yeah. Like having that situation where you can just show up and it's like it's not a commercial show. It's like there's just a bunch of rings and you'll go fight and you can rack them up big. We're probably too quick in Australia to start to do the real show, the professional format show. Like, because you go up to nationals, that's what you get. There's 3 rings, there's juniors in 1, there's 2, there's side by side, and you can rack the fights up.
Yeah.
But am I right in saying that there's a little bit now of kind of these days there's kind of a little bit of pushback on the juniors in that part of the world? I read a little bit of posts like this. Now you're starting to get a little bit more argument about what rules juniors are allowed to fight. Is that something that comes up?
In the UK, not so much.
Yeah.
It's not too bad there because the rules there are very different.
Yeah.
So you've got like something called N class, which I believe is pretty much juniors fighting, but slightly more experienced juniors. And what that allows them to do is to fight with shin pads and only shin pads. So no head guard, no body shield, nothing. And I presume that's obviously to protect the athletes, especially at a young age. But so yeah, these people that are having the fights, they're having fights with only shin pads. They're still taking effects on the body and still getting used to that effect. But over here, I believe it is more so structured, and it's almost partially difficult. For example, there's one young girl from Gav's gym here in Perth. I believe her name's Amelia, and she is really good. She is really good. She hasn't had any. She might have had 1 fight, but she's only, I would guess, about maybe 8 years old, 9 years old. But over here in WA, the rule is you can't fight until you're 12. So that means that Amelia herself is going to have to train for 3 more years at least until she can actually have a fight here in WA.
14.
Sorry,
it's 14. Okay.
Here, it could be 14 here. Like I say, I'm not that into the rules. I think it's 12. But yeah, that's a good point. So juniors have to train for 4 or 5 years consistently before they can actually get an opportunity to go in the ring. Whereas over there in the UK, it's just like, all right, you've been training for a while. There's an event on. There's 4 rings. Do you want to have a crack?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think maybe one of the problems, it's an interesting topic. I think one of the problems about getting juniors involved, there's a few problems. There's a lot of time they have to be a little bit older before their parents,
of course,
which is of course a big part of it. But I think the other thing is that a lot of the time a truly amateur format doesn't really exist, like we touched on before. So I have always thought of kind of that UK scene as it's very like amateur junior fighting. It's very much, it's a lot more like community sport. It's not like the big glitz and glamour shows that you get to sort of semi or professional. It is just, it's a similar atmosphere that you might expect. Which
but
the kids as well, right? Like takes the pressure off it a little bit too.
Absolutely. The one thing though that I really like over here in comparison to UK is the way that the padding structure is. For example, over in the UK, if you're an grown adult, and you've been training for a while and they put you in for a fight, it's 5 rounds. Each round is 1.5 minutes with a very little break, but there's no pads. So there's no pads. So some of the fights you see can be a bit messy when it's the first time. Whereas over here, when they've got the pads and stuff on, it's almost like they're able to learn and develop properly before they take all the pads off and go for it. There was one fight in the UK I saw where the chap caught the opponent's kick, and he just kept kicking the front of his shin to sweep him. But what actually happened was he done it that much that the guy kicking his shin actually hurt himself. Because he wasn't experienced, and then he got stopped because of his own. Pretty much. Literally, he stopped himself. He couldn't walk on his leg. Whereas if that was here, he would have learned the lesson because it would have had shin pads on and so on. You know, so there's pros and cons on both sides, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think because in New South Wales, it's not that different. I think the main difference between what we do and how it is in WA is like you guys have a set number of fights you have to have with pads on, make them off. We have we start with, or people tend to start with, it's not mandatory, a development day rather than an amateur fight. And they wear that IFMA style of padding. And there was a bit of pushback to formatting it that way when we started doing it here because people wanted their fighters with pads off straight away. But I agree with you. I think it's definitely not necessarily, like I can see the argument both ways, but I do like to get guys in, and you make a good point. Like when you can just make a mistake without the physical consequence, you can get back in the gym on Monday and just figure it out, and also fight again quickly. Like we used to have a lot, people would smash their shin. Like I used to see people that smash their shins in their first fight so badly that they had to take a few weeks off training, and then that few weeks would become a few months, would become forever. Like people can't develop.
It's one of those things. It's very hard. Once you break that routine, it's difficult. Obviously, when I was talking about the comparison between Perth and the UK, and I think it's better for fighters to have pads on, that's my perspective as an outsider. As a fighter, grown up and being in that situation, I always wanted pads off. I didn't want pads. I hated pads. As an athlete, as a fighter, I never want to even fight with pads ever in my life. So if you're an amateur sitting listening to this, I agree. If you want the pads off, it is how it is, but it's for the health and safety, you know.
So we'll keep on just kind of following your career. So you are unique for Australia as someone who got to start that young and be busy from a young age. Tell me about your experiences as a kid in Thailand. So when was the first trip to Thailand? How did that come together? Were you just at home begging mum and dad? Just run me through your exploits in Thailand as a young man.
So I'd pretty much been going back and forth to Thailand, I would guess from about 9 maybe. We were mainly going for a holiday, and I was getting some training in between, just with my family trip. From Australia, Thailand feels like it's not that far. From the UK, Thailand feels like it is another world away. So to get to Thailand, it's a long journey. It's about 20 hours at least. At least. So to do that regularly was quite hard, but we were able to do it. Begged my parents, was able to go there in terms of summer holidays and stuff. Would go there.
Were you the first time you went?
I was probably about 8 or 9. When I first went myself, I think I was 14.
You went by yourself at 14?
Wow. So what actually happened was there was a promoter who's now the Yokkao promoter. His name is Brian Calder. He used to have some very big shows on in the UK and still does to this day. And he actually brought in a couple of Thais to his show, top level Thais. And my sister, Natasha, she actually got a photo with one of the Thais called Samingprai, just after his fight or before his fight, whatever. And long story short, they started speaking online and they got to know each other. And eventually what happened was me and my sister went out to Thailand and together, and she never came back. She ended up staying there with that Thai Samingprai. His nickname is Bao. So what happened was they obviously got married, had kids and all that. But that gave me an extra avenue to be able to train with a Thai superstar my whole career almost.
Yeah.
And he taught me everything he knows. So big shout out to him. Very lucky in that regard. So my mum would trust me that any time I'd go to Thailand that he would look after me. So I was very lucky. And yeah, he would accept the right fights for me. He wouldn't put me in fights with taxi drivers. He actually put me in at the bottom and built me up, much like a fighter would here. Where I started to become recognized on certain shows, and then I started fighting on TV, and then I started fighting in stadiums, and then I fought for the WBC world title. WMC. So yeah, we pretty much started from the bottom and worked my way up. So I was very lucky.
So how many fights roughly have you had in Thailand?
Probably about 15, I would say. Yeah, about 15.
Tell us a little bit about like what occurred. I know you fought at the major stadiums. Run us through some of the highlight fights in the Thailand career.
Yep. So a couple of good ones actually. We went to a fight show, and it was a good fight show. It was a local show. It wasn't a big production. It was a local show, but they had a lot of good talent. A lot of local boys like Rod Tang and all that. They were all from the same area. So this is where they become superstars before they hit the stadiums. So we went to the fight show. We had 2 fighters fighting on the show, and we got there, and the 2 fighters on the show actually didn't fight, and 4 others who went to support fought. That included me. So what happened was, so we went there, and I was eating like a pot noodle or something like that, some noodles, and my brother-in-law was shouting at me from the other side of the venue, George, put it away. And I said, I've just sat in the car for 6 hours to drive here. I said, I want my pot noodle. And he's going, put it away. So I, for God's sake, put it down and said, what is it? He pulled my arm, pulled me into a circle full of gamblers, put me next to a couple of boys, went, nah, next one, threw a couple of boys in the mix and went, yep, these boys will fight. And I went, okay, when am I fighting them? And he said, oh, in about an hour's time, you're fight number 4 and fight number 1's on now. And I said, you're joking. I said, no. So that was it. Went and fought. So I had quite a few occasions like that. And then when I started to be known, obviously, because there's only so many tall, skinny white boys in the middle of nowhere in Thailand.
A bit of a novel, you're right.
That the fight started to become, we started to get pre-matched. They knew what to expect. And it was no longer a surprise. So after all that, we then got the opportunity to fight on a relatively good show in Rajadamnern, where I fought this chap from Iran. He was Iranian, and we fought at 65 kilo. And as you know, in the stadiums, if you're 0.1 kilo over, you're cutting weight. Yeah. You got to put the sweatsuit on, you got to cut the weight, you got to make the weight. And I was, like I say, I wasn't that big at the time. I was probably fighting about 61, but I accepted the fight at 65 with the same day weigh-in and stuff.
Yeah.
And this chap comes steamrolling in. He comes to the weigh-in. I look at him and I look at my brother-in-law and I think, is that who I'm fighting? He is humongous. And he went, oh yeah, that's him. And I was like, all right, here we go. Stood on the scales, I weighed in, no worries. He weighed in 2.7 kilo over. And I said to my brother-in-law, I was like, bearing in mind, we weren't based in Bangkok, so we flew from Patalung, which is South Thailand.
Yeah.
We flew all the way here for this fight. And he said, well, you got to cut the weight. And I literally just sat there watching this guy run around the stadium. I had like a packet of Mentos, and I was flicking them in the air and going, eat my Mentos while watching this guy run. He lost about a kilo, and my brother-in-law came up to me and he said, George, we have to make a decision. This guy's been running for the last half hour or so, and if he continues to run, he's not going to be able to fight. So we said, okay, I'll fight. You want to fight? Like, you think he's tired enough? You think he's learned his lesson? Then yeah, we'll fight. Sure thing. Fight was on. Fight started. The guy came absolutely bombing forward. I've never felt this. He was so strong. He could almost like just push me out of the way, and it was easy. He was snapping my neck back. He was really laying, and this was just the first round, which I didn't really expect. And then round two, actually, it was a little bit of luck, if I'm honest. I hit him with like an upwards elbow, and I was able to cut him from here to here, and it was a big cut actually. I was quite impressed. For what that.
If you're listening audio, here to here, he kind of gestured across his nose. If you're on YouTube, you can see, but if you're on audio, he was from one side of his nose to the other side, basically.
Yeah. So it was a peach, and what pretty much happened from there was, I started to get a bit more confidence, and every time we started coming running in, I was just kicking him and moving and kicking and moving, and eventually I won the fight. But I think without that cut, I don't think I would have won.
Turn the tables a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was just more of a confidence thing than anything.
And where was that fight? Did you say, sorry?
Rajadamnern Stadium. Yeah. So I ended up having 2 fights there. I went back again maybe about a year later. I fought a Thai, but I won on points, but the Thai was very small compared to me. So it wasn't like a top level Thai, but it was a good challenging fight. There was just a bit of a size difference, which made it a little bit easier than normal.
And what was it like? What was it like fighting at Rajadamnern, like such a I mean, it's the historical stadium now, of course, with the original Olympic going. So, like, just describe that whole sort of experience. Was that something like, for you going to Thailand, is that fighting at Raja real one of the dreams? Was it something that
Yeah. I'm actually really, really gutted that I didn't go for a crack at a stadium belt. Obviously, I only had 2 fights there. I was a long way away from it, but with the career that I was having, it looked very likely that I could have gave it a very good crack.
Yeah.
But obviously what happened was I moved here, and I actually got too big. Now was probably the right time. I could move to Thailand and have a good work my way back up and have a crack at the 70 kilo title or whatever. But it's just like, it's such a long process that I don't actually think I'll ever get to do it. But going back to your question, the feeling of fighting there is something else. I remember lying down on one of the tables, right, just to get rubbed down, Thai oiled and stuff. And I remember lying there thinking, wow, so many superstars have been on this table getting oiled exactly where I am. And most of them probably were there last week getting oiled.
Yeah.
So I remember just sitting thinking, this is a real good experience. And I'm definitely glad I've done it. If I had anything I would change, it certainly wouldn't be that. I just wish I could do it more.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing, right? Because in our sport, it's there's no other sport like it, really, in the sense that, like, the pinnacle to the traditionalists is a stadium belt. Like, if you want to, that's the premiership in football. That's the big one. There are plenty of sporting analogies. It's the top one.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not like you can just go and do it. Like, you've really got to immerse yourself in that. It's not and like, you would be able to explain this better than I could. It's not even just a matter of moving to Thailand. It's a matter of really, like, you've got to move to Thailand and decide to be a stadium fighter.
Yeah,
There's different ways you can even, like, feel free to expand on that. If you've got more thoughts to add, but it's like, even fighters in Thailand, they've got to decide, do I want to go that path and be the stadium fighter? Because it's almost like I mean, I imagine if you're like, it's almost like a whole different sport in itself, the classic stadium fighting.
Yeah, because the rules are different. Obviously, it's heavily persuaded towards or moved towards gambling.
Yeah,
where the gamblers can almost have an effect on the fight. And what I mean by that is obviously when the gamblers are going crazy, it can almost affect the fighter's confidence. It can bring them up, it can bring them down, etc. But there's so much involved trying to get the opportunity to fight in a stadium, like especially Rajadamnern. You can't just rock into Thailand and go, hey, I want to fight. You've got to have, I think, the right contacts, especially to do it correctly. For example, Petty Academy. I know a couple of chaps that have gone there, Michael and Daniel McGowan and stuff, and they've all done it as well. They've gone from a young age. But the good thing is, because Petty and D are actually promoter at Rajabandhan and Lumpini, or one or the other, that they can automatically get fights in the stadium. Of course, they earn it. They don't just rock up and get a chance. But once they've earned it, they go straight in and they work their way up towards that stadium belt. It's a long. It takes many years, I think, and there's very few foreigners that have actually done it.
And I guess the other side of that now is there's sort of all, Thailand, there's a lot of Muay Thai, but there's different kinds of Muay Thai. And if you're a foreigner living there, a lot of the time the immediate money is on the TV shows, your Super Champ and sometimes your Max Muay Thai as well, even like Thai fights and so that. And like you said, to get an opportunity at Raja at the top level takes a lot of time and a lot of grinding, whereas like a lot of these TV opportunities are right there. So, and I mean, like that's kind of the game you've got to play too, I guess, because if you're living there long term, you need to make that happen financially, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's almost a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
You have to juggle a lot. It's very stressful. Like I know a lot of people that are living there now. Obviously, Eddie Farrell and Andrew Miller and all that, and they fight to make money.
Yeah.
And when you're fighting to make money, it doesn't matter what show you're on. It doesn't matter who you're fighting. You're there to fight, and you're there to win, and you're there to make money. And the analogy almost changes a little bit, whereas I was just a kid, as I say, I didn't really have that much outgoings. I had no rent at home. I had no responsibilities. I obviously had my brother-in-law there to look after me. So I was very lucky in that regard. Whereas doing it as a lifestyle is very hard. You have to get in your foot in the door as soon as possible. Even when you're fighting in the big stadiums, the money's not great, especially when you're just, it's peanuts, it's nothing. You almost fight for free. But it's the opportunity, and you hope that one day you can become a big name. And then when you're a big name, obviously you get paid top level, whatever that I didn't get there. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Is it, you're ever just clocking in for a day at work going, I could just jump on a plane at a time?
I really wish I could, like I say, it's something that I'll take to my grave with me. I'll definitely regret one day not really giving it a crack in Thailand. But at the end of the day, I had 15, 20 fights there. I'm still fighting Thais to this day. I'm still fighting on a good level. I've still got a good job. I've got a good life. I can't complain. I'm really happy with the decisions that I made. So no regrets there. I just wish I had a red hot crack.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep the story going because there's just so much to get into, like, especially such a young, like, how old are you now, George?
22.
22. Like, such a young guy. You've had such a career. So we talked about kind of the real junior stuff back at home. We talked about your little career in Thailand. So how did you end up in Perth?
Yeah, so once again, I was very lucky. Although I worked very hard for it, I was also lucky. A chap got in contact with me. His name was Gavin Fuller, who owns Gav's Gym over here.
Yep.
And he explained that he was looking for someone to come in and fight for him. And he's got a real good passion. He's a very good man.
Yeah.
Even to this day, love him to bits.
I need to have a show, actually. I'd like to hear from him.
Oh yeah, he knows everything. Well, he knows Muay Thai inside and out. Honestly, he was a Muay Thai purist.
Yeah,
but anyway,
things about him.
Yeah, so I was only 17, and he said to me, "Okay, George, we want to get you here." So we started looking through the process and stuff. I actually had to be 18, so I had to wait till my 18th birthday. And what happened was on my 18th birthday, there was only a couple of days after, where I actually knew that I needed to get my driver's license before I came, and I couldn't get it because I wasn't 18. So I had a couple of days gap between like my birthday and flying here. And what I had to do was I had to pass my driving test. And I sat down with my instructor, and he was actually a good friend of mine, my instructor. And he said, "So George, your test is obviously on like the 4th of July or whatever." He said, "You're not ready for it. I don't think you're not going to pass." And I said, "Well, I got to get on a flight, so I have no choice really. And he said, well, if you fail, you know that you're not going to have a license by the time you fly. And I said, yeah, but if I rebook, my flight's already booked. I can't delay my flight. Long story short, I went, let's just give it a crack. And in the UK, it's very hard to pass the test. Actually, I think it's a lot harder than here. And I was very lucky. I must have had one good day of driving, and I passed my test. So then, I hopped on a plane. No parents, no family, no one came with me. Didn't know Gav, didn't know anyone here. I spoke to a couple of people on Messenger just to kind of get to know people. I came here. I think under Gav's gym, I had 12 fights in a very short space of time. I think it was only a year and a half,
I remember
something like
you
that.
being really busy as soon as you got here.
Yes. I think my first month here, I had 3 fights.
Wow.
And then I was stepping up at short notice to fight on great promotions like Rebellion and stuff as well, and Epic and so on. And then what actually happened was Gav had a change in the business where him and his business partner went separate ways, and it was a long story, and we weren't sure if the business was going to stay open or close or whatever. Eventually, I sat down with Gav and I decided to move on, where I've now come to Riddler's. Gav to this day has been an absolute gem, supports my career in every way, shape or form. I still talk to him pretty much on a daily basis, go in and see him whenever I can. So we've got a real good relationship. And
Just
then obviously I
to
came.
make the business decision on changing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like there was a fallout or anything.
Nah. Like I say, it's one of those things where Gav almost feels like he's lost his son because I was always under his wing, But at the end of the day, I've tried to make it clear to him that I'm always here. If he ever needs me, I'm always here, And now that he's got the Muay Thai Grand Prix promotion, we're working very well together. He's getting some good fights. And yeah, he's really helping me out, and I'm obviously helping him. Bringing fans to the show, and we're really helping each other out.
Yeah, so give us a little bit of, because you fought some real superstars since you've been in Australia on our scene, and also internationally. Like you fought Yog Kompon on Rebellion. Just give us a couple of the highlights, a couple of the. For you, we've all seen your career, but what stands out to you as sort of the top moments?
Well, top moments were probably the fight on One Championship against Smoking Joe.
Yep.
The fight against Yog Kompon, main event on Rebellion's such an honor.
Yeah.
I fought. There was a fight show I'm sure called the Contender about I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, something like that. 14, 15 years ago. And that was the pinnacle of Muay Thai. And without going off on a tangent here, I was sitting there watching it with my mum. I'd only been training not very long at all. And we were watching this thinking, oh my God, this is incredible. And then when I came here to Australia, I had a pullout on one of my fights on Epic. And Darren Reese, obviously from Riddler's Gym, he was very lucky to get on the phone, and he actually flew in one of the fighters from Canada who was living in Thailand at the time, who fought on that Contender show. So I remember the lead up to that fight, I'm sitting thinking, wow, I'm fighting someone on that show that I sat back thinking, this is incredible. So for me, that was a real honor, So I was able to fight him. Obviously I fought Alexei, who's one of the best at 65 here. I've had a lot of really, really good fights.
Yep. So that kind of, I do want to touch as well. So since you've been here, of course, you've had 2 big fights on One Championship. You're currently contracted to one.
Yes.
Just kind of, we're all stuck where we are. Tell me about the One Championship. It's kind of the pinnacle of the sport. Commercially, it's the pinnacle of the sport. As far as exposure, it's the pinnacle right now. Talk me through that experience. What was that like?
The feeling of fighting on the show is something that I've never experienced before. The fans there are incredible. They love the athletes. They're not just there to watch. They're not just there to watch their mate. They love every single athlete on the show. And whether you are from, I don't know, Asia, France, Europe, Thailand, the fans are really into it, So that creates a good atmosphere. Obviously, the way that One Championship look after you, there's a lot of medicals, tests, so you know that you're never going to fight someone who's maybe got Hep B or Hep A or whatever.
Always nice.
So
It's always nice, a little bit of security.
yeah, so they look after your health and safety.
Yeah.
Obviously, they've got the hydration tests and stuff as well. And not only that, you know, they look after everyone. You're flying to a new country, you're fighting on a new stage, you're fighting the top level people. What more do you want, you know?
You're excited to get back to one.
You have no idea. You have no idea. I am ready. It
Any
doesn't matter
talks at
when.
all? Any talks at all over the course of kind of this, you know, when they were doing that quarantine?
So we spoke to them, Darren and I spoke to them maybe about a month, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And we obviously just mentioned, hey, we're here whenever you need us. Obviously, it was during COVID, so they didn't really have any answers. They were obviously going through a lot of experimenting themselves business-wise because they didn't expect it either. But nothing secure, no opponent names, no dates, nothing like that, which is unfortunate. But they know that I'm here, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's been I don't know how long, maybe 18 months since my last fight on one. And I think since then I have grown so much as not only an athlete but a person as well. I've got physically better, I've got mentally better. When I fought on one championship, I thought this is it. I'm not going to get any better than this. I'm now starting to hit my peak. And since then, like I've gone from here to here, which once again is from low to high, you know. I really think I'm ready whenever the time comes.
Yeah, well, it is quite an amazing thing, right, to be the age that you are and also have the experience that you do, because you're still in good shape. You know, you're still physically like kind of even before your prime, I would imagine. You know,
Yeah.
like you don't have any sort of major ongoing injuries from your career.
No.
So like the ceiling is high to have the experience that you have already, but still so many years ahead of you. It's kind of a crazy thing.
Yeah, I've got a long journey ahead. Like I say, I want to create a legacy in the sport. You know, I want to be like your John Wayne Parr, where Liam Harrison, where you mention their name and everyone goes, I know who that is. That's what I want my name to be. Whether it takes another 10 years, whether it takes another 5 years, however long it takes, I want to be that person that people think George Mann was a great fighter in his day, you know?
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm really set out to achieve. And I think that's what's actually motivated me to do what I'm doing, you know?
Absolutely. And in that kind of one championship roster, is there anyone that they currently have signed that's sort of on your opponent wish list?
So it's a bit of a tricky one because obviously I can fight across multiple weight divisions. So at the moment, yes, I can still make 70. Will I again? I'm not sure. Probably not. It would have to be a super fight. I can do it, but physically on the body, it's probably just not worth it.
Yeah. With their weight protocol, especially.
Yeah. I would absolutely love to fight the champ at 70. I'd fight anyone, preferably under Muay Thai rules. Obviously at number one, you've got Pit Moricott and stuff at 70.
That'd be a very interesting fight. Yourself.
Yeah, very good. I think we fight quite similar.
Yeah.
And then obviously you've got the guys like Superborn and stuff and Capitan, but I think Capitan's moved down in weight now.
Yeah, I think he was 55 last night.
Yeah. So sorry?
Did you catch Capitan last night?
Yeah, it was a good fight.
He's good.
Yeah. I wasn't sure because it was kickboxing rules, but yeah, listen, there's a lot of names at 70, even at 72.5, we've got Sami Sana and a lot of more European boys. And then at 78, that's the next division up for one. We've got all the big boys. We've got Nicky Holtzen, we've got Reagan Erso, we've even got John Wayne Parr. There's so many big names that I can fight. And it's really just down to one. No, I'm ready. Doesn't matter who it is. We'll just fight, you know.
That's an exciting prospect. Like, yeah, especially like you say, he could go down to 70. I think the divisions are like kind of 70 and 77, right? But they do some catch weights as well.
Yeah.
So you've got a big spread, and like that's what is so good about one is they're aggressively signing. Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, it's a real dartboard thing. Just throw it and you match up well with anyone. And considering like you've been there twice and fought. Smoke and Joe and Soccer.
Soccer,
yeah, like, so you've already proven that, like, you can get in there and go, and I think that says how they want to match you as well. Like, they treat you with someone who's going to come in and fight the top guys, which is good.
Yeah, and that's what I want. I've said it since day one. I'm not here to fight the lower grade guys. I literally want to fight the best guys there are It doesn't matter who they are. I want the fights. I speak with Darren. It's funny because Darren will come to me and he'll say, "Okay, George, this promoter's contacted me about this fight," and I'll go, "Yeah, cool." And he'll say, "Are you sure you want to like, go and look at them?" Then I would just fight, you know. And that was obviously towards the start of mine and Darren's relationship. But now that I've been with him now for a couple of years, he knows that when a fight comes through, we're taking it. You know, we're taking it. There's not many fights that I'll really say no to. So yeah, the ceiling is high, like you said. There's a lot of fights. There's a lot of good fights. I'm still young, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of exciting wins and losses as well to come.
Yeah, and just on the mention of your trainer, Mr. Darren Reese. See, on this show, like I bring him up a lot. He's someone I look up to, someone that I really revere as a Thai boxing genius. Talk to me about training with Darren. I guess like what was the adjustment like coming in from another gym, and also like you're in an interesting spot because you come to Riddler's having trained in very elite places in different parts of the world. So what was it like initially? What was the adjustment like? What kind of were first impressions? And yeah, just describe becoming a Riddler's fighter.
It was a big adjustment. Very, very big adjustment. Gav's gym was a great gym, but it was smaller than Riddler's, quite significantly smaller.
Such a big fight team at Riddler's. It's
man, they're massive. So you should see the board now. The board's double the size than what it was previously. But anyway, so Gav's had a small, good fight team, but maybe only 4, 5, 6 fighters, good level. Whereas Riddler's, you're coming there and they've got like, I think on the board now, there's probably about 45 names. Crazy. But they are all active. So they're not like if you're not here for 6 months, bang, your name's off the board.
Yeah.
Like if you're but not just training, like if you're not fighting, your name's off the board. Like you're gone, you know? So there are 45 active people who are in the gym day in, day out. So if you can imagine how busy our fighter classes are, it's something else. But not only that, like it's easy to get fighters in the it's not easy, but it's easy to get good fighters in and train them, right? But what Darren's done really well is he manages it to a T. Like he manages it. Like for example, he's got a lot of top names in the gym, but he's also got a lot of people who are just starting out, who have maybe had like 3, 4, 5 fights. But the way that he manages the top level to the less experienced is the same. It's not like because I've had 100 more fights than the next guy, I've got any more say than he does. Like we're all treated as equals. He runs it very
kind of dynamic.
Definitely. Everyone works together. We're not individuals. If someone's not doing something, you're on their case and you're trying to help them. And then he just advises anyone who's got a little bit more experience. Show people if you don't have a fight, if you've got some time, stay back 10 minutes and show someone a technique or something, you know. And that's what we do. And then what happens is the less experienced people who were maybe less experienced 2 years ago, because of the amount of fights that we're getting at Riddler's, they might now have 20 fights already, and they are now teaching people themselves because they've had such many fights in such a short period of time. So he manages it well. He treats everyone as equals. Obviously, he couldn't do it without the support of his team around him. And what I mean by that is Dan Skinner, Barry Oliver, Dylan Olsen, and obviously his wife, Kaylee Reese. They've got such a good management team where it's not just Darren. He's got Darren plus the team, which makes it work.
Yeah, it's a real like I really admire the trainer. Obviously, of course, admire Kaylee as well. She's like an Oz Muay Thai hero. But I love to see the way and the things I hear about really like it's just to me just thinking as far as like process design. It's like I think it's hard if you don't know the sport to appreciate how insane it is to manage a fight team that size. But also like you guys probably rack up 200 fights for your team over the course of the year.
Yeah, we get a lot of fights. We get a lot of fights, but not only that, everyone is different. And I don't just mean that in terms of style, but I mean that in terms of attitude and personality. And everyone actually needs to be managed differently. So some people, let's just say if you get a bit nervous, you might need that confidence boost. Some people who just like to stay quiet. You've got males and females. Obviously, I personally think it's harder for males to cut weight over females. So there's a lot of like moving parts. It's not just as simple as, okay, you've got to fight, you go and fight. You've also got the different styles that your opponent could possibly be. You got the different gyms. You've also got the flights traveling over east and back, Like
Yeah.
we had fights last year, obviously pre-COVID, where we had fighters on in 3 states in the same weekend. I'm pretty sure Darren actually flew from one show on the Saturday straight to the other one on the Sunday morning, and I believe he also cornered it in a different state the following morning.
I think I remember that. I think it might have been see, this is how much I keep up with everyone else. Was that Nationals and Warriors Way? I
believe so, yeah.
I think I remember Darren because I was at that Nationals. Yeah. I saw him on the Saturday, and then I saw him at Warriors Way, like on the TV, and then I saw him again on the Sunday. And
honestly, like
in 2 places.
Literally, you know, and we've got that on many occasions. That wasn't just like a one-off. We actually have that many fighters fighting on different cards, and they manage it. You know, they manage it because Darren trusts in his coaches, and not only that, the fighters, all of us who fight, we also trust in all the coaching staff. It's not just Darren.
Yeah.
Darren's amazing, but he's passed that on to the rest of the team. You know.
Yeah, and that's as much as anything the measure of a great trainer, right? Because you can train fighters to fight, but you can also pass on like an ideology that allows a gym to continue. Like I really think that's, like I say, that's the measure of like a truly comprehensively great trainer is you can train people to fight and also train the next generation of trainers. So they can continue, like you said, to get more experienced and it becomes like a self-fulfilling kind of process.
Literally, yeah, on the money there. So now, as I say, there's nothing I can say bad about Riddlers. They've given me a lot of opportunities. They've improved me a lot as well. The way that I train now is very different to the way I've trained any other way before. They introduced me to strength and conditioning and stuff as well, which I hadn't done anything of before. Going back to what you said about
for you getting into like, because I know in Muay Thai there can be look. So I know you to be you know, a very humble guy, especially for like how many fights you've had and for kind of just how well known you are. And I know a lot of people in your experience, at your experience level, would go into another gym and if things were different to how they'd done them in the past, kind of turn their nose up at them. Like that's just how fighters can be sometimes. So for you, did you meet any of things like, because I know some fighters, especially experienced ones, are very like, and we talked to Don Heatrick last week, a Muay Thai strength and conditioning coach, and we touched on like, fighters often will be like, well, you don't need that for Muay Thai. So having not done it how did it feel for you to really kind of embrace a whole different style of training after 100 or so fights, 100 fights?
It was hard. It wasn't hard mentally. Like I didn't go there and go, nah, I'm too good for this, because I knew the effect that it had on fighters. Like I was going there and I'm looking at his fighters and I'm thinking, these boys are like Tyler Hardcastle, for example, right?
Animal.
He trains like a machine.
Yeah.
And when you look at him, you just think, yeah, whatever. But when he kicks you, right, you feel it, and even with the size difference, with the weight difference, you feel it.
Yeah.
And he can really let them go. So when I looked at him and I came here, I looked at Tyler and I went, for such a small guy with so much power, the strength and conditioning obviously works. I'll be honest, I wasn't very good at it. I'm better now. I'm not the best, but we'll get there one day. But it was funny. Going back to what you had said earlier, my moving from obviously one gym to the other, when I went there, part of the training was we do strength and conditioning and stuff before we start. So we were doing strength and conditioning, and it was funny because a few of the boys, Tyler and Riley, and they were all laughing at me because I couldn't even do push-ups. I couldn't do pull-ups. Still very average to this day. Couldn't do any work with the bars. I just couldn't do it. I'd never done it before, you know. And they were laughing at me, and I said, boys, don't you worry. Wait till we start clinching. And they went, nah, we'll get you. And it was funny because when we started clinching, in my head, I said, I've got to make an impression here because all these boys think I'm weak, you know. And then when we started clinching, it was funny. I was pulling the necks and stuff. But obviously since then, all the fighters have improved. It's not just myself that's coming up, it's everyone. There's one chap that I just mentioned there, obviously Riley.
Yeah.
When I came to the gym, he probably had, I don't know, 8 fights or something, just a guess. 8 relatively okay level fights. Whereas now he's stepping up. He's training, like everyone in the gym now has to really think when they train with him.
He's the big one next. I
He
saw.
does.
Oh, so who's he got?
So he's actually fighting one of my last opponents, Chris Killer Watt.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, big
Yeah,
fight.
and
Big
that
step up.
and that's gonna be an interesting one. A lot of people have asked me, because obviously I train with Riley, I fought Chris. Chris is a top guy as well, so he's someone that I also keep in contact with. And I really don't know. I
It's a
suppose
good
it
fight.
depends. It depends how Riley adapts to the step up. Because it's 5-3s. It's something I believe he's not done before.
Okay. Which
So
of
yeah,
course he's done many times, which
yeah.
does make a difference. Or
So it's
rather.
yeah, exactly. So it's a step up, but it just depends. At the end of the day, it's one of those ones where it could probably go either way. With the fans that look at it, will probably sway towards Chris, rightfully so, given his experience and who he's fought and stuff. But me training with Riley on a daily basis, and I know how much he's actually improved, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a good fight. That's one of the fights that I am really looking forward to.
It's a testament as well to the quality of fights. Oh, excuse me. It's a testament to the quality of fights you can put on, even if you close the borders and just do WA only. That's a great fight. Those tiers within WA where you can give someone a big step up, but you don't need to pull someone from interstate.
For sure.
You do it all at home.
And that goes back to my last fight. Actually, let's just say I'll take you back a couple of months where Darren and I were sitting here in the middle of COVID, no idea what was going on. I actually, just before COVID started, I was fighting a chap called James Honey. James Honey stepped in at last minute, so I decided, okay, we'll move up and wait a little bit to work with him.
That would have been a fun one.
Yeah, it would have been a good fight. So I moved up to 76, just as a one-off, and I went, okay, I'll just fight this fight. I'll go back to 70 as I do. Got cancelled the day before the weigh-in. So then I was waiting, and I said to Darren, I want to fight. It doesn't matter who. I want to fight. And Darren said, okay, well, he came back to me a couple of weeks later and said, okay, George, I've got 2 fights. Like, which one do you want? And I said, okay, who are they against? And he said, against Chris and against Stefan. And I said, I'll take both. And he went, are you sure? I said, how long is there between? And he went, 3 weeks. And I said, yeah, I'll take both. And he goes, are you sure? Because I'm going to confirm it. He goes, I said, yeah, I'll take both. And then he came back to me the next day and he says, confirmed. Both of them are confirmed. So then that was it. Training started. I fought Chris at 72 and then I fought Stefan at 76. But going back to what you were saying there and the reason that I brought that up, without the borders being closed, I probably wouldn't have taken that jump up to 76.
Yeah.
Because there's so many fights between 70 and 72. I can make the weight. Against Chris, it's the easiest weight cut I've ever had. Like I really made it easy. Like credit to the boys that helped me with that. We'll go into that shortly. But yeah, credit to the boys. So I made 72 and then I fought 76. But without the borders being closed, I probably wouldn't have had that fight against Stefan. At the moment anyway, it probably would have happened down the track. But because that has happened and the fight went the way it did, it's almost gave me not just the confidence, but the belief that, yeah, I'm good enough, I'm big enough, I'm strong enough, I'm physically able to compete with the top boys at that weight. And then, yeah, here we are. You're right, there's a lot of different tiers, there's a lot of step-ups, not only for the other fighters, but there's a lot of step-ups for me as well. Yeah. I thought when I fought Stefan, that was a good step up for me. It's a good step in the right direction, and I'm really happy.
Yeah, and there's a lot to get into there as we keep talking about your career. I've got plenty of questions for you, but I think that it essentially brings us to present day. So I think here could be a good time we've got a little bit of an announcement, right? So we'll get into this. So I'll set the scene. Muay Thai Grand Prix came on strong. They were going to put on another sick card. It was looking like things were going quite well with, border restrictions. We were going to get a Chad Collins fight in the main event. semi-main was going to be yourself, George Mann, versus one of Queensland's very best, Jaden Anod. And this was very interesting because, like you mentioned, you've been coming up in weight. This was up in weight again, all the way up at 78 kilos.
Yeah.
But Jaden is a monstrously sized bloke. Like, he'll fight all the way up to, I think, cruiserweight. Like, he'll go up as heavy. I think I've seen him fight at cruiserweight and shredded to absolute bits. He has a 30 pack, I think.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, me too. But then, of course, we had some sort of poor luck with borders closing. So you've agreed to step up to 78 kilos, another step up in weight. That fight's fallen apart. We have been given word that they've replaced your opponent. So we'll keep this under wraps a little bit until the promotion's ready to announce. But who are we fighting on the next Muay Thai Grand Prix, George?
So it's an exciting fight. And I'm fighting David Pennimpede.
Wow.
From Muay U. That fight's at 76.3 kilo. And I'm fighting for the WBC Super-Middleweight International title.
Love that. Absolutely love that. David, of course, quite a good friend of mine. Kieran Walsh, quite a good friend of mine as well. Yep. Like you said, you're going up to 76 kilos and you're fighting the best. So when did this come together? When did you get the word here?
So really, when the fight was matched with Jaden, it was matched quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And then when it was announced, obviously a couple of weeks later, we then heard that the borders were then closed to Queensland and stuff. Yeah. And obviously that pretty much pulls Chad as well. So we're sitting there thinking like, oh, wow, it's still a while away. We'll still get a fight. And then the weeks were going on and on and on. And we're sitting thinking, or the days were going on, I should say, sorry. And they're not changing. We're still being hopeful that it will change. But then we spoke with the Muay Thai Grand Prix promotion, and on the last card, the main event was unfortunately pulled a couple of hours before the show.
Yeah.
And obviously with the Chad's fight being uncertain and my fight being uncertain, they obviously didn't really want to take a risk in hoping that the borders would open up and run the risk of both of their co-main fights getting pulled. So the show had to make an educated decision and said, well, we're going to have someone else kind of in the meantime, just in case. So they obviously put the feelers and stuff out. I said, it doesn't matter who it is, we'll fight. And then, the David fight came up. And obviously I was still matched against Jaden. And we said, no, we're gonna fight Jaden. But very worst case scenario, we'll take the fight against David. We'll take it. It doesn't matter, but we want to fight Jaden because the show specifically said, we are a man of our word. We want Jaden. We want Jaden. But then as time was going on, it was looking more and more unlikely, and we're thinking, what should we do? And then the show obviously made the decision to pull David in instead of Jaden. I've actually spoken to Jaden since. He was gutted. The guys at Strikeforce are top level guys. Top gym, good style. I fought one of the boys before, Odin Daniels. Very good gym.
Yeah.
I spoke to him and he said to me, Jaden literally said to me there and then, George, it doesn't matter how late you call me. If you call me day before the fight, I'll fight. He said, if you need an opponent, I'll fight.
You love to hear that.
He said, George, I'm staying ready. I'm going to be here. If you ever need a fight, I'm fighting. I want the fight against you. And I said, yeah, fair, So Jaden and I would have went ahead if it wasn't for COVID and obviously closing the borders. And it's a fight that could happen down the line. It's one of those things. Never say never.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, I prefer to stay at the lower weights, but I'll fight. As I've said many times on this podcast, I'll fight whoever. Muay Thai Grand Prix pretty much wanted to. We obviously informed Jaden after a couple of weeks of this happening, and then we're now waiting for the announcement. Obviously, when we release this podcast, the announcement's already been done. But just for everyone listening, when I had mentioned the fight to Hugh actually didn't know. So that is the first time he has heard who I was fighting.
Yeah. You can see with my facial response that I didn't know because I'm excited. Yeah. I'm really excited for that.
It's a good fight. David and I have fought in the same card a couple of times. He fought here over in WA. I think he stopped Sam Ballantyne for the WMC Australian title.
Yep.
And then I fought on the same show when I fought Yodkampon. He fought a chap from Sitmanchai as well, and I think he actually like broke his eye socket.
Viral, like yeah.
Yeah, so David's he's fought a lot of top level guys. He's, in my eyes, from one of the best gyms here in Australia.
Yeah.
Muay reminds me a lot of Gav's gym, where they're a small gym, but they've got top level fighters.
Yeah.
Obviously Josh Tona and David and so on. So listen, I'm really looking forward to it. Training's going well. We're ready for the fight, and having the belt on the line, it's only gave us that extra incentive. I think the statistics, David's got a very similar record to me, I think. And then in the world, I am number 4 and he's number 6. So I believe as long as you're both in the top 10 in the rankings, you can legally fight for the WBC International.
Yeah.
And then obviously the winner of the WBC International, I believe, can then fight at the very end of the spot for the world title shot next. Yeah,
because David and Jake Lund also fought for, I believe, that same title. It would have to be national one.
I'm not sure. I think that was national, not international.
I believe they did fight. They fought twice. I think. Yeah. Jake defended his international title in one of those. I could be wrong, but
I'm not sure.
I remember the same discussion, and that was when it was brought to the surface that the rule was, I mean, not that you're even actually from the same country, now that I think about it, was that 2 people within the one country, which is how it should be sometimes. You know, you can have a world title fight with 2 guys from the same country if they're both contenders of the world. So tell me a little bit at just a surface level about kind of your thoughts on, look, I mean, it's probably like, it's interesting for you now in that you probably, I think you always know how you stack up against the top guys in your own weight class. You know, I mean, like that's how fighters think. Like, you know, the guys around your weight and what you do again, even just at a surface level. But, you know, I guess fights like Jaden and like David, they're not really fights that were front of mind as ones that were going to happen. So give us a little bit of your thoughts on kind of how you guys match up.
So once again, it obviously comes down to the promoter, and not only that, the coaches as well. I take no dealings with the matchmakings. It's all done between Darren and promoters, whether that's Muay Thai Grand Prix or anyone else, Psy, Rebellion, whoever. We believe if it's a good fight, not only on paper, but for the fans and for the spectators, then let's do it.
Yeah. And what do you think of the style match?
Say that again, sorry?
The style matchup, this one that's exciting for you? Like when you hear David, do you go, yeah, that's going to...
Yeah, so David's got a good style. He's very relaxed, but he uses it in a forward momentum type of way. So he's got that traditional Thai style, but he actually does it walking forward, throwing punches, leg kicks, body kicks. He's a very well-rounded fighter. And obviously, as you saw,
good say.
Yeah, but he's not. Yeah, he's not the aggressor where he's just running forward, just throwing everything and anything. Because there's a lot of people like that, and it works for them. But he's very precise in what he throws, but he does it from a Muay Thai traditional style. Yeah. Who knows? Like I say, I'll just go in there. The way that I operate, I don't have too much of a game plan. I don't really watch my opponents. I tend to suss it out when I get there. Yeah. I learned a lot as a kid where I tried to predict how a fight was going to go, and it didn't go that way. Yeah. And then when it didn't go that way, it actually went very against me because it wasn't what I had trained for. Yeah. So now what we do is we just train my way, and then when I get in there, I'll see what they do, see how hard they hit, I'll see how fast they move, I'll see which way they come forward, backwards, left, right, or wherever. And yeah, we just adapt to it. You know, it doesn't matter what David comes to the table. I'm going to be ready. And so is he. You know, it doesn't matter what I throw. David's going to be ready. Everyone knows how I fight. Yep. I'm not the craziest person to watch in terms of aggressiveness or anything like that, but it's going to be exciting. It really is.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. There was some talk, mostly driven by me, about me going over there to commentate the show, which would make It's not impossible, but at this point would take some quite good fortune. WA are quite strict with their borders, as they have to be. Anything can happen. It's still got a little bit of time. I think we have to be zero locally. I think we need a 28-day streak of zero locally acquired cases before we can come with that quarantine. So I think
it can happen. It can happen,
but wouldn't bet the house on it. But look,
and that's what we had with Jaden as well. You know, it could have happened. Like, I still believe that fight would have went ahead, but it was a big
risk for you and a risk for the promoter, because what we get in this case is still a really good high level, world level fight. Just without the risk that it falls apart at the last second. So I'm crazy excited for that. Just being such a big fan of yours and such a big fan of, such a big fan of yours, such a big fan of David's, but also like such a big fan of Riddler's and such a big, I'm a big fan of and more you as well. So that's good news. I'm glad we got to touch on that here. So I'll switch slightly here because we've kind of been through the career. We've been through what's coming up. I did have a few questions that people wanted to ask, and I don't want to keep you all day.
That's okay.
Let's fire through a couple. Now we've touched on this in periods of time. You can go into as much detail as sort of you choose to, but when it comes to yourself, a lot of the questions are about, this dude is really big. And people ask, people want to know, you've mentioned it, you can still make 70. And you touched on as well, you had kind of a sort of revolutionary sort of weight cut for your last one. What's the process like getting down to 70 for you? Is it something is it pretty brutal? Is it something you'd rather not do anymore? Just talk to us about that.
Yeah, of course. As everyone knows who's probably watching, I'm not exactly the smallest 70 kilo fighter or even 76 kilo fighter. I'm still pretty humongous for that weight. But it's not necessarily brutal. In fact, actually, it's far from. All right, it's far from. I'm very lucky to have the team behind me. Two guys that I really want to mention is Jack and Jordan. Jack is known as the combat dietitian, and Jordan is known as the fight dietitian. All right.
I see these guys.
With the help of these two gentlemen, they have really, really made my life easier.
Is this the first time you've spoken to kind of like a combat sort of dietitian? Have you tried to engage a dietitian?
As good as them anyway. Good as them. I've never saw anyone, because they're not just nutritionists. They're not people who have gone to uni and who have got a degree and who can give nutritional advice. These guys are experts.
Yeah.
These guys are experts. They know
well, which is important.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Because I imagine someone your size, if you went to just like a dietitian, and said, hey, I need to make 69.85 kilos in 8 weeks, they would go, don't.
No.
Very much.
Yeah.
Not going to help much. Tell you not to do it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where you're only as good as the team surrounding you, And very thankful for these guys. I believe they've not only improved my health, but they've changed everything, So moving on from that, it's not brutal. All right. It's just when I'm making these weights, it can just be long. Like I said, my fight from Chris, I was a little bit heavier coming out of COVID. I think everyone really was. So even making 72 was very easy in terms of physical. I wasn't in pain bodily. I wasn't in pain mentally, nothing like that. It was just a long camp where I had to make sure I was running every day. I had to make sure I was eating clean every single day. There wasn't a period where I could sit down and go, you know what? I want to go out and have a meal.
Yeah.
So it's not brutal, but it can be a bit long and annoying where when you're sitting here watching a movie, sometimes you want a bag of popcorn. Sometimes you want a packet of sweets. It's just more of an annoyance than anything.
Yeah.
But Darren and I have spoken, and we know I can still make 70, but I think for the long term, with what I've brought to the table in the last couple of fights at the heavier weights, we think that I'm going to be more exciting. I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be physically better. And we think I'm capable. So this is why we're now taking these fights, and we're challenging myself. We're throwing me in the deep end. And yeah, we're really excited.
Yeah, love to hear. And I do think you know, I was very excited to hear that you were fighting a bit heavier, like seeing, because, you know, you went up to 72.5 kind of a while ago. That's where a lot of your fights been recently. And then to go up to 76 again, like, saw it as a move that had a lot of like potential. Like, I think there's really good fights up there. And like when I heard you were fighting Stefan, I was like, sick. Like, to me, it's a real kind of super fight thing. Like it just, and David's a great example. Like, it just kind of opens those floodgates a little bit of like, there's a lot of potential. It's a very good weight class in Australia. So yeah, happy to hear that. And I do love, even just from a point of, you know, motivation, inspiration, I like to see fighters that are willing to push themselves and just go, yeah, because I think some fighters do, even when they are bigger for their weight class, if they can make one weight, they won't go up to another one. And I think we lose out on fights that would, sometimes it's just about putting on a great fight. It doesn't matter if it's your class or, you know.
Absolutely. And leading up to the Stefan fight, I was really like, I always believe in myself. I'm not overconfident or anything like that, but I always back my own ability. But going into that fight, I knew I was there for a fight. You know, I wasn't there for a mess around. I'm not there for a play and move around the ring. And I knew that was going to be a fight. So it's one of those things where we challenge ourselves, we see how we go. And if you win, you win, you lose, you lose. You know, it doesn't matter. Of course, it was a bit of a risk because obviously the bigger your name gets, like in fact, it doesn't matter how big or small your name is, you don't want to lose. Right? You don't want to lose, but it happens, you know, it happens to the best. Doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was very thankful that I didn't lose that night.
Moving through, like, I think I was just perusing the questions we could ask. To be honest, I think if you asked a question, 80% of them we just covered conversationally, so I won't bring up things that we've already brought up. Like, you know, things about your journey and stuff like that. We've told your story pretty comprehensively. Do you want to answer the question about if you could fight one historical figure? Do you have one? If you could fight any historical figure, no idea.
Honestly, I couldn't even answer it. I have no idea who I would fight. Good question, but I have no idea.
It's an interesting question, but
yeah, it's a good question. And the other thing that a lot of people had commented on was, and I get it every day, is my size, is my height.
Yeah.
And it's one thing that drives me absolutely insane because everyone always says, "Oh, George Mann, he's just tall. George Mann, he's just tall. Oh, if George Mann was shorter, he wouldn't have won that fight. Oh, George Mann is tall." And for me, it's like, how long and how many fights do I have to take before people eventually say, okay, maybe he's not just tall. Maybe this guy is actually pretty good at what he does. Yeah. And I'm starting to get there now, but only because I'm taking these bigger fights. You know, like Stefan was bigger physicality than what I've had previously. Jaden obviously would have been as well.
Jaden probably bigger again, I think, than Stefan.
Yeah, for sure. So now it's getting to the stage where everyone that's just saying, "Oh, George Mann is tall," I'm starting to really try and prove people wrong because I know a lot of tall fighters out there who can't use it. Yeah. You know, I've been training since day one how to fight the way I fight. And it's the one thing that drives me nuts. So if you're sitting here watching saying, "Oh, George Mann is just tall," stop. I hate it.
Well, I think, like, you know, I actually was thinking I'd like to touch on this as well because I had quite a similar conversation with Darius when we had him on. I think people like to watch a fighter that fights at an elite level and they like to just come up with some God-given reason why it's easier for them than it is for others. I think that's how people's minds work. Like, it's easy to just go, well, if I was 6'4", I could do that. But like, and I said this as well. I went into some detail about your fight with Chris when I kind of broke down the Muay Thai Grand Prix. And I think I said on that episode, if you're watching that and thinking that's just a tall dude, you got rocks in your head because like it's a style, like everyone has what they have, right? Like you've got your physical attributes and there's like if you know how to use it, like, you know, let's use boxing as an example, you know, like Mike Tyson was a 5'10" heavyweight, but he made that his advantage. He was not disadvantaged against longer fighters. Even sort of like you watch Rod Tang in the stadiums often fights longer, rangier guys that are trying to play a long at-range knee game. Like his most recent one, I think, was at he had one. It kind of he had one on the P&D show. I forget the name.
I know. I saw the fight. I can't remember.
Long rangey guy that was trying to shut him down with knees from the outside, but he used his even just his physical attributes and his stylistic attributes to his advantage. And I think you're a fighter that, yes, you are very tall for your weight class. You know, less so now that you're up 76 plus. There are guys, but especially like, you know, when you were fighting down even in the 60s, you were like skyscraper. Right? You've learned to use your physical attributes, and that's what makes you it's not what makes you a smart fighter, but that's a part of being an intelligent fighter is you've been trained and worked on your own to be like, this is how I'm built, and this is how you have to fight for your build. And you mentioned it, like a lot of guys don't know how to fight to their frame. You got like, you know, tall guys that hunch over and don't really know how to hold their distance, and you got short guys that don't know how to kind of work things close range. So yeah, I think I get it when people want to look and be like, oh, he's just, but like for every, you know, George Mann, a tall fighter who knows how to be a tall fighter and really knows how to execute, you could find 100 massive tall fighters that have no idea how to use it.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say it's one of those things. All the fights that I've had as well growing up, it's just helped, you know.
Yeah.
All the training sessions, I'm very lucky. One thing I want to mention is my mum. You know, my mum on here. Although we no longer live in the same country, we still talk every day. But without her, I would not be here, because there was, let's just say, for example, train 3 hours a day, right? 6 days a week. She was taking me to the gym. She was taking me back. She was taking me to the gym. She was sitting in the gym. She was taking me back. She was driving me 7 hours to go on a fight. She was driving me back. She done everything, right? And she is one of the ladies that got me where I am today, you know? So thankfully, because of her, I've been consistent throughout my whole career. I haven't had any break. COVID's the longest break I've ever had without a fight.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I think on average, I've had a lot of fights. There was some years that I was fighting 12, 13, 14 times a year. Like tournament based, for example, like 3 fights on one night, but even pro rules, 8-man tournaments and stuff, you know, not just padded fights. It's only really now that since COVID's kind of kicked in that the fights have obviously slowed down. But I've been very lucky that the consistency and obviously everything in my career, my mum, my brother-in-law, all my coaches that have helped me, Gav, Darren, Tommy Young back in Glasgow, and any others, Vinnie Williams and stuff, everyone who's helped me in my career have all got me to this point. And without them, I would have, I wouldn't be here. You know, I'd probably be back in Scotland, renting some apartment in the city centre, spending all my money on alcohol and something like that, you know. But for anyone who's got kids who's watching, the one thing and the one message that I always want to spread is get your kids into Muay Thai. It's not just a fight. I know we're talking about me fighting at a young age. It's not just a fight. Everything that you learn humbleness, you learn respect, you learn respect for everyone. Everything that you can learn from doing a martial art is incredible. So if you've got a kid there that wants to get into it, get them into it. If they don't want to get into it, let them try it, you know. I was a football type of guy, you know, and then one day, as I said to you, I followed my friend and here I am. Without making that one decision, that would never have taken me down this path, you know. So for anyone listening, please, if you've got kids or even yourself, if you're an adult, get into combat sports. The amount you can learn is incredible.
Yeah, it's an awesome message. The same for me. I started not quite as young as you, but started training quite young. And yeah, completely agree. We'll finish on a couple more of these questions. Jake wanted to know what's your kind of biggest piece of advice for an up and coming fighter with similar physical attributes to you? It's kind of come out of that last question. So, what is kind of your key pointers for, you know, a lanky fighter training?
Yeah, so it's really to test yourself in uncomfortable situations. What a lot of people do is when they train, let's just say, for example, I'm sparring with Tyler.
Yeah.
All right. Tyler's a very Muay Thai stylist, much like myself. Him and I can stand there. We can look at each other and we can just pick each other apart skillfully. Right. When I spar people like Luke Miller, who's a 95 kilo heavyweight, who's very, very, very skillful for his experience and size.
Right.
And then also Riley, who I also talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Those two are very different spars, where they make it very uncomfortable for me. They put me in tricky spots. They almost try and make my life a misery. And you know that when Riley, for example, hits you with a punch, he's hitting you with a punch. You know, he's not here just to mess around. He's the nicest guy on the planet, but he's there to make it uncomfortable, make my life a misery.
Yeah.
So as a longer fighter out there, put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Spar with people that you know is going to give you a nightmare. Don't take the easy spars. Challenge yourself in every way, shape, or form. If you're sparring, if you're at an event, if you're just training with a couple of friends, it doesn't matter if you're getting the better of the other person. It doesn't matter if they're getting the better of you. Learn from it, and you'll improve.
Yeah, great advice. We'll finish. We'll just do one more because we've don't take too much time. But if you just give like a sort of an overview of what a day's training looks like for you?
Yep. So I always run for about 30 minutes. Sometimes I'll get up before work and I'll run before work. Sometimes I run just before the gym.
Yep.
So let's just say, for example, I run before the gym. So I'll get to the gym at 6 o'clock. Or before 6, I'll run at 6. I'll get back at 6:30. We start training. We do our skipping, our strength and conditioning. We do our clinching, our pads, our bag work. We do everything you could possibly think of on a daily basis. And then we always do abs and core and stuff as well. So by the time you get home, let's just say, for example, I go to the gym. I leave the house at 5:30, right? I get to the gym at 6, train till probably about 9. By the time I get home from the gym, it's 9:30. By the time I shower and I eat and stuff, it's 10:30. And then I sit on the PlayStation or I watch a movie or I do something. Man, it's midnight. And then before you know it, you're up the next morning ready to go again or to work. That's pretty much what I do on a daily basis. And then on my days off, I'm not just sitting here doing nothing. I'm doing recovery sessions.
Yeah.
Darren and the team at Riddler's actually taught me a lot about that. Treating
What
my body.
kind of things will you do for recovery?
So we'll do regular sauna sessions.
Yep.
Where you're doing stints in and out. Not only is it good for the body and the muscles and stuff, it actually gets you prepared for like cutting weight. So
Yep.
when the time comes to cut weight, you've already been there for the last month and you're used to it. You've climatized almost to a certain extent. We'll do massages. We've got a lovely lady at the gym called Rhonda, who is the best person I've ever saw in terms of massages. She is incredible. She's really, really, really good. So she obviously go and see her as well. She fixes me up. And then, just like relaxing. Sleep's a good one. And I'll be honest, I can be quite guilty of not getting enough sleep. But sleep's a good one for anyone listening.
Yeah.
There's
do a lot more of that, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's one of those things. Like what I do as well is I actually play football on a weekly basis as well, because that's one of my hobbies. It's something I love doing. So I train Muay Thai 5 days a week, and then I train football twice a week. So I train once and then I play a game on a Sunday. So my time can often be limited. So what I have to do is I have to kind of work around that. And for example, go to the sauna before football training or after football training. And then when they kill us on a Saturday session, then I have to go to the sauna afterwards before the game on Sunday, and I have to do my food prep on Sunday. I'm lucky. I've got my girlfriend. She's not actually here today. Her name's Shannon. She's number one. You know, without her, I'd be clueless. You know, so really, really thankful to her. You know.
Yeah, I mean, you're a busy man. Honestly, like it's amazing to me that someone who fights at your level is still like, I still want to play football. Still want to like work it in, but I guess it's so important to keep just the things that just you like keep that balance.
Yeah.
It's important to keeping your training focused, I guess, because you don't start to feel, I guess, like trapped. Like you still live your life. Obviously, you're very focused on your career too.
Yeah, no, as I say, I love it. I think you've got to have that separation because, as you know, if you're training that amount of time, so let's just say, for example, on a weekly basis, you've got 100%, right? 33.3% of that, you're probably asleep. The other 33.3%, you're probably in the gym. And then the other 33.3%, you're probably at work.
Yeah.
You know, so what I'm trying to do is to add another bracket in there, and it's just do something else.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, I've got a lot of friends in football and stuff. A lot of people my age, they like to go out, they like to go and get drunk, they like to go and do all this sort of stuff. It's not really for me. I think I'll drink once a year, and that's at Christmas. Apart from that, it's not really for me. Instead, I like to do things more actively. I don't know, go for a swim, or go rock climbing, or go and play table tennis, or go and play football, or I don't know, something where I'm doing something active. And I'm very lucky that my partner has much the same. You know, she's not the type of girl to want to go and do that either. If I was to give her the opportunity to, or the option to go out with all of her friends on a night out, or go to the cinema with a bag of popcorn, she'd go to the cinema with a bag of popcorn. You know, so I'm very lucky in that regard that we are very similar people. And yeah, listen, I can't really say anything else on that.
No, it's good. It's good to see, you know, that you are level-headed in that regard. You know, it's a lot of things to kind of manage, you know, across a career and a high-level fight career too. So I like to hear that kind of just time, that focused time management, like that way is like, you know, I'm not going to let the training drive me nuts. I'm going to take that time. But yeah, that's about what I had for questions. So I know I'm terrible at trying to keep this in any kind of time frame, especially when I talk to someone such as yourself that I could just talk to for ages. So I appreciate your time, George. I like to hear, you know, stories from your career. Someone definitely that at your experience level I look up to a lot. And I love to hear as well, like you're a very level-headed guy. I love how many times you came back. For me personally, what I really like to hear from someone such as yourself is how many times you brought it back to just gratitude for your trainers, past and present, gratitude for your family, gratitude, especially like, you know, for people that help you. It's easy to forget, you know, when you've been fighting, easy to forget, you know, that mum drove you to training, that, you know, a lot of people go out of that, and shout out to all the Muay Thai mums out there. I definitely have one.
And also, thank you very much to all my sponsors as well. You know, as you can see, I'm wearing the Punish representing. With the Punish, one of the top brands in Australia. You know, I go to one of the barbers, Main Street Barbers, just Main Street here in Perth. They look after me. You know, good vibes in there. Quandamooka Cup, obviously, mental health's very important.
Great organisation.
Yeah, everyone knows them. They're starting to become such a well-known company now, or brand, I should say, not company.
Gym opening now too.
Sorry.
They're opening the Quandamooka Cup gyms in process, which is great.
Yep, and it's all spreading the right message. You know, Sandy's doing a wonderful job there for sure. You know, so shout out to her.
Yeah.
And then obviously, as I mentioned earlier, Rhonda, the combat dietitian, the fight dietitian, and obviously Riddler's Gym. You know, like without all these people, and Gav and Muay Thai Grand Prix and everyone, you know, it's one of those things where you really, really have to say thanks, because without all those people helping me in the background, we wouldn't be here today, you know.
Absolutely. And yeah, like I said, love to hear, you know, that gratitude. I think it's super important, and like to see someone who fights at your level still maintaining that. Where can we find you on social media if we want a bit more George Mann?
Yep. So obviously Facebook page, George Mann, it's MANN. Instagram, George Mann 1. I believe it's George Mann 1. Yep, George Mann 1. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. A lot of people aren't on LinkedIn, but I am. I have my fighting on there. I got my business on there.
Yeah, I like that. We're LinkedIn connection.
Yeah. So it's a different way of social media.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, if you're in Perth, if you're coming to Perth, pop into Riddler's Gym, come say hello. You know, send me a message. I'm happy to help anyone who wants to listen. If anyone's got any questions, I can always answer them directly. Feel free to give me a call. You know, you can. I'm always happy to help where I can. That's for sure.
Yeah, I definitely have had plans for ages. I've never even seen Perth, so I want to get over there and would love to come and train with yourself. Would be a big honor, and would like to get stuck in. But of course, 27th of February is DGP. If you're in Perth, get down there. If you are not in Perth, live stream will be available. Find Muay Thai Grand Prix Australia on Facebook and Instagram. That's always the best place to find a stream. Get involved. Sick card, as it always is. I will hit the outro in a second for the iTunes listeners. George, hold the line. I'll chat to you a little bit afterwards. Again, thank you very much for your time. Awesome to hear your stories. Really appreciate it. Everyone, get on to those events. This episode will come out. I mean, you're already listening to it, so it doesn't matter. But we will hold off on this episode until after the official announcement. We are so excited for George versus David Pennimpede. That's really some good news for me to hear today. Stoked to hear it. I'll be back with another episode shortly. I'll get one done during the week because I want to talk about Capitan. And we've had guests every week, and I just know people want to hear from just me sometimes. All the listeners miss me. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Combat Chat Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Subscribe, like. If you like this episode, please show your friends. Trying to do some work to grow Muay Thai in Australia. If you like what we do, I'm sure your friends will like it too. So don't hesitate to press share. But until next time, thank you very much.